I heard someone say that conflict is the rocket fuel that motivates viewers to stay connected.
I think that's a pretty talented art. So I'm just kind of curious, is that something that you just come by honestly, or does it take a little bit of work, or is that just a lot of experience that has kind of led you there? You always find a way to say, okay, let's do something slightly different. How do you kind of like continue to find that level of inspiration where you're not trying to tell the same exact story every single year?
You wake up one day and just go, is this worth it? Why am I doing this? Because it is emotionally taxing.
Welcome back to the show. Have you ever seen a video that just absolutely touched your heart, pulled at the heartstrings, invoked so much emotion that you wanted to just do something? It got you to move. Well, I have a very special guest today, Adam Welch, who is an absolute genius and artist at creating videos just like this. And I can't tell you how honored I am to have him on the show and to talk about this very thing. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Thank you, Charles. I'm humbled by the compliment and privileged to be here. So thank you.
Well, man, I got to tell you, I have been the kind of the recipient, like on the other end as the viewer for a lot of your videos. And as I watch them, I'm looking at them and going, man, I am just amazed how much emotion you pull out of me, on the very thing that, you're filming, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and it could be for any organization or whoever you're doing work for. But when I see one of your videos, it absolutely makes me want to learn more about that organization or do something with that organization. And I know that's the whole point, but I don't think a lot of people have that ability like you. So I'm just wanting you to like talk about just how you got started in this and, how you got to here because, I got to tell you, man, your work is really, really good.
Man, I appreciate it. I feel like my core talent is taking things that sort of like long events and making them look more interesting than they were really in reality. I take an okay event and I can make it look pretty awesome, that sort of a deal. And so as I've moved into sort of a niche where I do a lot of these mission moment videos, a lot of it's just, talking to a stranger basically and having authentic curiosity about what their situation is and then trying to sort of coax them in a particular direction with the questioning, like, was there a moment that you felt a certain way or just asking why, sort of the 7 levels of why, like, why do you feel that way? Why did this, and then taking the resulting content from that and sort of condensing it or distilling it down into something that will tug at the heartstrings of the viewers. So I work for a lot of organizations that a common query is, hey, we got a fundraiser dinner coming up, like how we first met maybe 2.5 years ago. Hey, we've got a fundraiser coming up. This is what we kind of want to talk about. Can you make that into a video that's interesting and not too long because we'll lose our viewers, at this event if it goes beyond 3 or 4 minutes, something like that. And so I've ended up doing a lot of work in that space. But yeah, I wish they were all super emotive and amazing. But yeah, a lot of people call me and say, hey, here's the person whose story we want you to tell. Here's the rough outline. Go. And I go, okay. And sometimes it's awesome. And other times I look at the timeline back at home and I just go, oh man, what am I going to do with this? So.
Right. Because
it's
again,
organic. It's real.
It has to be organic because a lot of people, I mean, these are real people with real stories.
For sure.
And it's not like, oh, hey, I've got a professional actor that's going to come in and let me give you a script and this is exactly how I need to say it. But that's one of the things that's always amazed me about your work is that you have this ability to draw this out of people. And I know that it probably takes a little bit longer in some cases. And, sometimes it might come a lot sooner. But when we're watching a 4 to 5 minute Adam Welch production, right, there's probably hours of video that has probably been recorded that you're combing through to be able to put that in. And that is the beauty of what you do, man, is to be able to pull those moments out, formulate them into a 3 to 5, 8 minute video and be able to get that end result of having somebody connect with that organization.
I think one of the core factors in any good video, basically, I heard someone say that conflict is the rocket fuel that motivates viewers to stay connected. And so there are several types of conflict, but basically I follow this strategy. It's called like everything you need to know about screenwriting in 4 slides, I think, something like that. And so it says a character who wants something faces an obstacle that's overcome when they meet a guide who leads them to success and not failure. And that's sort of the basic strategy. So when I meet with anybody, hey Charles, what do you do? And you say, well, I help companies and individuals navigate the world of benefits. I go, wow, how'd you get involved in that? And I sort of ask questions. It all leads back to sort of that strategy. I'm like, who are you and what do you want?
Right.
What's the challenge that you ran into? And then were you able to overcome it and how? And so when I'm interviewing someone like these videos you just saw that I shared with you this week, I meet these strangers and they've got some tumultuous backgrounds.
Yes.
And so I know a little bit about that just from the brief that's written. But I basically just say, hey Ben, tell me about your childhood. Where'd you grow up? And so people will sort of condense their stories. And I don't know if this is interesting enough to talk about, but the basic thing that happens is people will retell their experience. And what they tend to do is give a lot of sort of unnecessary detail. And then right at the end of their sort of thought progression, they'll sum it all up. And so when I'm talking to someone in an interview, I'm listening for those things. I'm going, how did they sum it up? Was that usable? Is that going to help connect the dots without the context of the other 2 minutes of sort of that went into that last final sum? So yeah, that's it's a lot of talking to strangers, trying to approach them with an authentic, just an earnest curiosity about what they do,
right?
Or what led to the life circumstance that we're trying to talk about. So just authentic curiosity about them, really listening, and then being ready to engage in sort of an organic way when they give a response. So I was filming something for one of my orgs a couple weeks ago, and there was a local news, like a field reporter, down at the arena, and this guy had sort of pre-written questions on a sheet of paper. And the first thing he said was, so what branch of the military did you serve in, to this person who just received a gift on behalf of Caliber Collision? And she goes, I'm not a veteran. And the guy's like, oh, like his brief card was wrong or something. And I was giggling because he kind of scrambled instead of just asking an authentic question like, how do you feel right now? Hey, you just got a new car. Are you excited? Like, you don't have to have some complex list of questions just to be curious about a stranger. What just happened? Well, you were just given a car. Well, how'd that come to be? Well, I wound up in foster care, and after doing some things, this organization said, oh, you're deserving of receiving this gift, and that's how I got it, right? Like, you don't have to have these pre-written questions in order to have authentic curiosity about what someone else does. And so I think if you turn your listening ears on and engage, like even with a stranger, if you engage that way and just say, hey, I'm genuinely curious about what you do, even if I know nothing about it, I definitely have an ability to walk down that road with strangers. I'm pretty fluid about asking questions and then listening and just trying to engage with it. So yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I think people, I'm going to give you a little more credit than you gave yourself, because I will tell you that one of the things I think that's probably really challenging, right? Because you're very engaging and you're good with people, and you're good with getting them to tell, the information that you need. And sometimes, they may not want to come out with it, and then you just know the right questions to ask, but you're also really good with dealing with different personalities, right? Because, there's different people in different organizations, and there's different expectations, and there's a lot of, I would say, opinions is probably the proper way to say it, that come into, hey, this is what I want. And it gets a lot of complicated, scenario. And I've sat with you through this process, so I understand it firsthand, because you might have 2 or 3 people that have really good vision of what they want. And what you're doing is, trying to represent the organization, for the very purpose that you're trying to convey to the audience. Sure. But at the same time, you're trying to figure out, how do I put these visions together and find the commonality and common theme, that whomever that's in the room that wants you to do this video for them is, working through. So I think that's a pretty talented art. So I'm just kind of curious, is that something that you just come by honestly, or, does it take a little bit of work, or is that just a lot of experience that has kind of led you there?
When I'm having a conversation with a non-professional, not professional talent, a lot of what I'm doing is trying to mirror the emotions that I want out of the situation. So I think that when I sit down with somebody and we start talking, typically either myself and or an assistant, we're sort of tweaking gear as someone comes into a space. And so we start with sort of entry level. How are you feeling today? Are you excited about this? You nervous? Oh, well, I've been producing video content for a long time. And really, I just want to know about your story. I feel like, a lot of it has to do with sort of setting the stage of building rapport with people early in our engagement. Because for most of my jobs, the first time I meet someone is when they walk into the room where we're going to film this thing. And so it's not a whole lot of time to build rapport, especially when I'm going to ask sensitive, probing questions. So a lot of what I do is trying to build rapport early. Wow, I read the brief about who you are, and I'm really excited to learn more about this. So trying to build rapport with a stranger early, but then a lot of it is sort of mirroring, like I say, the responses that I hope to achieve out of a particular conversation. So a lot of the work that I do is trying to motivate viewers at a fundraiser dinner to engage financially with an organization.
Right.
And so, a common tactic I try to do is to basically introduce a character in such a way that the viewers will say, wow, that person's like me, or they're like my child, or they're, so what I'm trying to do is create relatability so that, viewers will say, wow, I see myself in them, or I can understand their experience and I can wear it for a moment. Right. And so as we start to take viewers on this journey, if they see themselves in it, and then they see the character go through challenges and they go, oh man, I felt that before. I remember what it was like when my mom died. Or I remember, if you can walk someone down a road that's relatable, then all of a sudden, they're transported into this world. We've succeeded, because then we're going to, typically what's happening is an organization says, hey, we need to show where we've been effective in the last year. Right. Here's the story we want to use to tell it as that vessel. So I go, okay, let's take this character. Let's show that they're relatable. Let's take the viewers on a journey. This person's just like you. They experienced a challenge, and then that challenge was overcome when this organization stepped in. And so then the viewers look at that and they go, wow, I don't have capacity to do what this organization is doing, but I do have some financial means. So I can help them to be more of what they are while I'm off being, what I am, So right. Anyways, yeah, so that's kind of the tactic there. Yeah.
No, that's actually pretty, I mean, in a lot of ways, when you kind of explain it that way, it's simple in the form is, what are you saying?
Right.
I'm trying to get somebody to connect, right? So they can support the mission of, whatever this organization does. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, they have to get emotionally connected behind
for sure.
This particular purpose. And then, they're going to support and, however they decide, mm-hmm. financially, mm-hmm. They're part of the fundraiser, or they volunteer, or they help in a different capacity. Mm-hmm. But the thing that's amazing about it is that if you don't have that emotional connection, right, people don't get excited about the very thing. Then they're like, oh, well, that's nice. Right. So these videos have to be very compelling, and it's not easy, because I think a lot of times you're learning about the organization that you're representing for the very first time. When they say, hey, I'm going to hire Adam to do this video, this might be, like you said, the very first time that you've ever done a video. You may not even know much about the organization, how it got started, some of those aspects of it. And your job, which you do extremely well, is to find all of that, put that into a video, and then ultimately have the audience be able to connect. And that's your first time around. And I think what I really enjoy about this particular thing is when you do your second and third round of videos, because people always want you to come back and do it again, you always find a way to say, okay, let's do something slightly different. And how do you kind of like continue to find that level of inspiration where you're not trying to tell the same exact story every single year?
That's an interesting question. I think that that for some organizations, it is the same story every year, but we just have to present the material in a way that's fresh so that the viewers don't get bored with it. I think that's part of it. I think, full disclosure, I don't know that I've been in the game that long to, I've really niched down on mission moment videos in the last 5 years. And so how long is that really? I've got.
Well, it's 5 years, Adam.
Well, I'm just trying to think am I going to experience bigger challenges and we get to like year 7, 8 with some of these organizations. You know, I've watched Bakersfield Angels, for example. They contacted me their very first year of existence, and I think that organization succeeded in a much more rapid and large way than they anticipated early on. So the first year they had a pretty humble fundraiser dinner, but then I think we just completed their 4th year, I think. And now it's one of the better events that I do anywhere. It's polished and it's awesome, and that comes through in sort of the decor.
You're seeing the variation of this,
I'm watching it happen in real time, and so my role in that, I'm sort of growing with them, like I'm learning how to become more proficient at this skill at the same time. So, but like with that organization, they come to me and they say, hey, here's the story we're going to tell. We usually start strategizing early in the year and then figure out if there's any particulars we need to change right when we're getting close to the end. But like last year, they started the year and said, hey, we've got this idea. Here's what we want to do. We started plotting. And then midway through the year, they said, hey, we're going to scrap that all together. We want you to tell the story of this lady and her mentor and this young man and his mentor. And so suddenly the whole thing flipped. I might be crossing stories. Oh my goodness.
No,
yeah, I
right.
totally am. Yeah, it was the previous year. Anyways, I don't know. I don't know if that's going to become more challenging as time goes on, because you're right. Like it probably does end up starting to sound like we're beating the same drum over and over.
Well, but then again, I mean, you might be talking to a different audience, but you have never been, and this is one of the things I've always respected about you, is that when you do a project, and I'll be like, hey, you know what, let's use some of the older footage and like kind of do that. And you're like, no, absolutely not. Right? You're like, absolutely not, Charles, because every video is purposeful, and you're not trying to use recycled material in it, and you're trying to make sure that it's staying fresh and crisp. And that's something that, like, me as an entrepreneur or business owner goes, okay, that's efficient. You've already got a ton of B-roll. Just go ahead and use that.
Sure.
Part of the story.
Sure.
Maybe you kind of use this piece, that piece, and you're like, no, because the whole story has to flow. And I think that's why you're extremely effective, is because you're looking at it from start to finish, and you know how this all needs to be assembled as you're looking at everything that you're trying to get.
I think that, there have been many times where a client might say, hey, can we just use some stock footage for XYZ? Or I can think of several projects in the last year where I tried to mock up maybe I go and grab the interview, but then before we capture B-roll, I go and try and assemble some stock footage that'll help visually. What is B-roll and A-roll? Like A-roll is anything where there's dialogue, someone's talking, and B-roll is anything with non-speaking, there's no dialogue, it's just supportive footage. So I often say, I'm just trying to give visual legs to the audible story that's being told.
Right.
So what, it's, if you're trying to use stock footage or found footage, something that pre-existed the current project, a lot of times it's just trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, because we're like, yeah, it kind of works, but what is that compared to just getting the actual character in the spot that they're talking about in the story? It's like it's more, yeah, you're right, it would be efficient, but it's always like, is it worth that minute savings versus just going out and capturing something fresh and kind of working it that way? But yeah, I think of several projects in the last year where I tried to put stock footage in, just going, maybe they'll bite on this and then I won't have to go do it, and it just doesn't seem to work out. Occasionally you get lucky.
Right.
One of those Garden Pathways projects I just did, that character Ben, he was talking about how earlier in life he had attended like a church revival in a tent. He's like, and it became a key part in his story. I'm like, I just filmed a tent revival in Bakersfield in the last 4 years. I was able to dig through my archives, and that was great supporting footage. Worked out really well.
Right.
It seems like more often than not it doesn't. So anyways.
So you're very passionate about what you do. I mean, always. I could tell. And there are moments that you kind of go through it and you're like, man, it's really rough, because there's a lot of deadlines, there's a lot of video, and editing isn't really simple. But what keeps you going, man? What keeps you going and motivated?
Man, honestly, I used to think that I was just rock solid and couldn't be bothered by the cyclical nature of emotions, that I feel as a creator. I joke that I used to make art and now I make money. I used to say that all the time, and so that I used to make art, now I make money.
Dude, I like that. But did you say it just like that, or were you just like noble about it? Like, man, I used to make art, now I make money.
If you looked at my kind of career path, right? I had a blip where I was out of videography for a couple of years. I was working in the energy sector in Oklahoma City. But outside of that, basically from high school until now, I've worked in commercial video production in some capacity. And initially, I was just excited. I was, bright-eyed kid who was just pumped to go make anything. And it was just fun, and it was fun to create. But I got into wedding filmmaking in my early 20s, and that ended up being where I really started to make real money. And so I got excited. But if you look at those first couple year films, it was all very niche and artsy, and I'm like animating cake decorations and just doing creative stuff because I loved it. Yeah. But then getting years down the road going, man, my back hurts. Why am I doing this? I just need to simplify this. The clients don't really care about that. Even though I'm over here like trying to create something that I'm really pouring my passion into, what do they actually care about? Speed and cost, So trying to reorient myself towards what customers want, that's become a real thing. But yeah, I am an emotional person, and I think it's become more challenging in recent years when I pour my heart into something and a client comes back and says, oh, we need 20 changes on this. Wow, by the time I complete your list of changes, you've neutered the project from what I created. We can do that, but there comes this sort of this chasm where the project has gone so much out of what I saw and what I created into their vision. That's okay. But then we cross this valley where I'm like, okay, you have to tell me where to move the pieces, because what I did, I already did. I already made it the way I knew how to make it, and it made sense to me. And what you've done is change it in a different direction. Now I don't really see the vision, and that becomes a weird stifling point. So, those things happen.
Yes.
And, I feel like what gets me excited right now is partnering with my wife. I get really pumped when she works on a project with me or is involved in the client calls. I don't know why, but just having a comrade, having a buddy that we can both look at a project together and we can be joyous or we can gripe or whatever and just be in it together. I find a lot of joy in that. But yeah, I have these kind of ups and downs throughout really every year where we go from excited, goal-oriented first quarter, things get tough. We get towards the back end of third quarter, fourth quarter, and I'm just buried in fundraiser dinner projects, and I can get a little crotchety. But yeah, we usually it's an annual cycle we follow.
No, I mean that's good. I mean, hey, it's real, right? Everybody that
do you
works
experience
in
that?
business. Oh, absolutely.
Do you get emotional about stuff?
Oh, of course.
When you close a deal, lose a deal, like what gets you emotional?
Man, that is the story, right? Because there is a very much passionate side of anything that you do in business, and it's hard, man. Right? You get into this moment where you've just put it in there the way that you think that the customer is going to see it, and you think, man, there is just no way that we are not going to see eye to eye on this. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you get there, you present it, and it's like, man, cold water, and you're like, okay, what happened? And then you spend that absorbent amount of time trying to figure out, man, what could I have done different, or what did I miss?
Right.
But it's interesting. I just did an episode that talked about falling in love with your idea. Mm-hmm. Okay, and because you believe that idea is like, absolutely perfect, and other people should think it's perfect, and
mm-hmm.
and other people should want it. But the thing that's interesting is that if the feedback is different, and you try it a couple of times and you get the same result, mm-hmm. right? Then you have to understand that there's going to be some tweaks. But I think that's part of the process. But I think for you, especially what you just shared, I mean, I think that in any business or any interaction with people, mm-hmm. You're not necessarily going to get the exact response that you want. But what's amazing about this to me is that, at least in my experience, when I look at, the end result, as I'm kind of going through it with you, even mm-hmm. on the projects that I've had you, mm-hmm.
work
on, I do see like that this is not something that is for the faint of heart. Mm-hmm. I think you have to really want to do this, to be able to be good at this.
I've got, several people that are kind of in my sphere that have either done this work or are trying to get into this work. And one of my dear friends right now, I feel like we've lived a very similar journey where we've kind of each in our own little silos gotten buried, and you wake up one day and just go, is this worth it? Why am I doing this? Because it is emotionally taxing. It's, it's taxing on our bodies. You wake up and you're like, man, I'm overweight, or I'm not sleeping enough, or I'm not, relying on substances. What do I do to live a healthy lifestyle and cope with the stresses of doing this job? Sort of the emotional roller coaster. And, it's definitely, there's good cause for pause, often where I sit down and go, okay, is this worth it? Are we doing okay? Am I providing for my family? Are we meeting our goals? Like, anyways. Yeah. How do you cope with it? Do you have like an emotional roller coaster
Oh, all
monthly
the time,
or
man. All the
annually?
time. I mean, I think when you're in business, you're going to have emotional roller coasters, and I think that's kind of part of the process. And I don't think that I haven't had a situation where, I mean, there's times when the waters are calm and there's times when the waters are not. And I think it's really how you deal with that issue, right? It's going to bother people in different ways, and people have to kind of deal with these things as best as they can. But, one of the things that I do is that, I do rely a lot on my wife for her to kind of put things into perspective for me, because she's a great sounding board. And, we've been doing this business for, over 15 years, and in everything that we do, it's really nice to be able to have that level of, back and forth, to be able to talk through the whole situation. And that's probably one of the best coping mechanisms that I have, is to be able to put that information out, to someone who understands, and vice versa, and isn't afraid to call me out on my own crap, right? Because I mean, if somebody's just going to be like, oh, it's okay, and this is that, I mean, that's not what you need to hear. So,
Right.
But if you go into this, so let's get back to just, I think a lot of people want to be video creators, content creators, editors. What advice do you have, for folks that want to do this? I mean, and it doesn't have to be like, I mean, what are a couple of things that you really have learned over the years that really has helped you, either get better at what you're trying to accomplish, or, how to just endure through it? Because I think people would probably give up. I mean, because this stuff can be really hard.
Yeah, I get a great deal of joy. It actually helps me cope through my kind of emotional challenges with my projects when I see another videographer. This happened many times over the past decade. Usually in a Facebook group for wedding videographers, someone says, "I'm staring at the footage and I just don't know what to do," and I get great joy out of saying, "Hey, lay out all the content in chronological order." Remove anything that doesn't speak directly about the bride or the groom, how they got together, or how awesome this day is. Like, remove everything else. Tell a story in audio, then gather all the visual content and put it together in groups. So you got the bride getting ready and the groom getting ready, and maybe guests gathering at the ceremony site, and then the ceremony happening, and then cocktail hour and speeches and dancing and the grand exit, right? You can kind of create these little subsets of content and put it all together. Just which of these things are not like the other, exclude those, and bring the content together. But that really is my job, whether I'm editing a wedding or a highlight video from a fundraiser dinner or something like that. I just try and go through the audio and say, what's the compelling content that other people are going to care about? And with an organization, it's usually like, why do I care about private school in Bakersfield? Okay,
Right.
Is there a compelling soundbite that's going to lend itself to that, so that when a casual observer is doom scrolling on Instagram, they go, oh man, I am concerned about the well-being of my child, or I am concerned about the future of Kern County. So I try and find content that happened that's going to compel someone for whom this service would be applicable, right? So it's sort of like market segmentation while cutting through, audio or video or whatever it may be. But basically, find the compelling parts, remove all the other stuff, and then say, is there a way to display this that's more emotive? Is there a way to tell this story that helps draw people in better? And so obviously when we're speaking kind of in a vacuum about, any number of generic businesses, that can mean a lot of different things. But I think the core advice is tell someone's story that you find interesting, cut away all the unnecessary parts, and then show it to a third party and say, does this make sense? And that's it, right? Like, that's storytelling, right?
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's great. Well, Adam, it has actually been an absolute pleasure talking with you. As always, I always enjoy that. So how do people find you?
So you can find me, primarily I get contacted from referrals. I have a website, but it's only there for legitimizing my existence on the interwebs,
Okay.
Basically, you can find me at adamdavidwelch.com, or on Facebook or Instagram under Adam David Welch. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the show today, and this is great. Well, there you have it. Some great advice from a seriously talented artist when it comes to creating compelling emotional videos. So if you found this episode helpful, I highly encourage you to share it with someone who needs to hear it. Always would like you to subscribe. If you have a moment, leave a review and rate the show. You can find us on YouTube at Hey Charles Biz, Hey Charles 77 on TikTok and Instagram, Charles Ernst on LinkedIn, and Hey Charles on Apple Podcast and Spotify. See you next time.